Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Open Forum. Today, we're going to discuss the as-is contract. I'm going to do the same thing I did last week with you guys when we did the listing agreement, and I'm going to ask that you do not ask any questions during the recording. I'm recording this so it'll be on our YouTube channel. If you don't know about our YouTube channel, contact Emily. She'll give you the link. We have a YouTube channel on YouTube, of course. And hold on a second, I'm turning off my phones here, because I'm going to be the same way, keeping it very silent and getting this done. And we're going to record this so people have a guide to get through it. Those of you guys who need a guide or might want to reference a guide in the future when going through these, just to know how to fill out the as is. And we'll get started here shortly. Again, please hold all questions to the end, and we will get started shortly. Afterward, we'll be talking about whatever you guys want to. Please save your questions, write them down, do whatever you need to do so you can remember them, and we'll talk about them after. Let's go to... Okay, do you guys see a MLS screen? I can't see any of your, very few of your faces here. Yes, you do. Okay, thank you, Natalie. All right, so let's get started now. Okay, guys, so we're going to make an offer on a property. Here we are looking at a property on MLS. We are going to, boy, we really like this property. Look at that, it's listed by one of our agents. Fantastic. Let's make an offer on this property. What we're going to do is we're going to go to either Form Simplicity or Transaction Desk. I'm going to go to Transaction Desk here. I'm going to click that, and it's going to open up this screen on Transaction Desk. Can everyone see that screen on Transaction Desk? Okay. So we have this screen on Transaction Desk. We're going to do the template. We're going to do the buyer's agent template. It has pulled up all of the information directly from the site. Okay. So here we go. While we wait for it to come up, and we have it. It's going to give me a list of forms that I may or may not need as I go forward with this. Here is the, well, let's do the, it's filling in the stuff. It's going pretty low. It's pretty slow. All right. So here we go, filling out this. $7.99. We can put the purchase price and stuff in here now, but I'm not going to. I'm going to wait until we get to the as is. I'm going to select it from the forms. Okay. There's the seller. We're going to fill in the buyer here. Okay, so it is filled in automatically, all of the information from the property appraiser. Okay, personal property, guys, everything here, you can put something like as listed on MLS, and as I put here, discuss with seller and write them here. These are the things that are listed on the MLS, things that we'll be conveying. Okay, so this is what you do. Typically, you're going to put as listed on the MLS if you're happy with that. Contracts override the MLS. I would typically put as listed on MLS here, or none. If I'm on the buyer side, I would put none there. Purchase price, let's say 800,000. Okay. We're going to, is to be made within 3 days. For the escrow, we're going to put down, let's say we're going to put in 20,000. Okay. Title company, we fill out whatever the seller has chosen for the title company from this. If they haven't put one, we'll let them put it later. This one, she has one here. Okay, Aloma Title, we would put all that information in right here under the title company. Financing, let's say that I'm going to borrow 70%. Okay. And it fills out the information here. If you put, let's say, It changes it. It does the math for you. Okay. Time for acceptance. I'm going to give a couple of days here. And then I'm going to close. I'm going to give myself, typically you're going to give yourself 45 days or so. Right now it's a seller's market, so maybe 30 days, but today's March 9th. So let's say I can close by April 20th, which is about 40 days. Okay. As we're going down here, guys, I want to reiterate to you guys, the reason that we're able to fill out this form is the Florida Association of Realtors and the Florida Bar, which is the lawyers group, have come up with the FARBAR, Florida Association of Realtors, FAR, and Florida Bar, BAR. So we are not attorneys. We can fill this out because we're licensees, okay? We can actually use these forms. We're legal to use these forms because we're realtors. So they're assuming a certain level of competence amongst us. So we have to be able to fill out these forms. And what they do is they, as you see, they make a bunch of check boxes and fill in the blanks. So we are not lawyers creating legal language. This is a legal document. We're not lawyers writing legal language. We are simply filling in the blanks of pre-written legal language, okay? So let's go down to if it's subject to lease or occupancy after closing. Guys, if they're doing a post-occupancy agreement, obviously this what this paragraph says, and I encourage you to read it. I'm not going to read the whole contract to you during this, but what this says is that the property will be clean and empty and ready to go, okay, when we close. This is saying, no, there's either a tenant in it or the owner will be living in it afterward. It will not be clean and empty when it's time to close, okay? So if there's a tenant or the owner is going to continue to live there, then we're going to check this box. If not, then fine. That means it needs to be clean, swept out, broom swept is the typical standard. Okay, let's go to assignability. Buyer may assign and thereby be released from any further liability under this contract. That is typically for wholesalers, people like that who want to try to flip the contract. If I'm on the selling side, I do not accept that. If I'm on the buying side, and that's what my client wants to do, then I will try it. The second one is may assign but not be released from liability under this contract. This is my favorite because a lot of times someone will want to add their significant other to the contract or delete them because their contract does not go, or sorry, their credit does not fit the lender's requirements or whatever. So you guys have all had people who sign a contract one way and then later on they want it to go in someone else's name or something like that. This is where they do this. So they want to add, they got to add mom or dad because they need a co-signer, something like that. This is where you do that. May not assign this contract. This is the most common one, especially in this market, because that is they're both completely safe for the seller, but this is the most obviously easy to explain for the seller. All this means they can still assign the contract. They just need the seller's consent to assign it, which the seller shouldn't have any reason. But in this market, if I'm representing the buyer, I don't want to give the seller any chance to get out of the contract because, as you know, we sign a contract today and then a month later they've got 3 better offers and it's worth $20,000 more than it was today. So I prefer may assign if I'm on the buyer side. Okay, this is a cash contract with no financing contingency. If it's cash, this is what you do. If it's financed, we've already decided it was financed above, within contract within 30 days of the effective date. We're going to leave our loan approval at 30 days. I don't like to leave blanks, so let's do 30. This was a conventional. Obviously, since I was putting 20% down, it's the conventional loan. You can do FHA or VA. You need the rider if you do that, the FHA VA rider if you do that. Check one, it's going to be a fixed interest rate not to exceed whatever the initial interest rate should match whatever my pre-qualification or pre-approval says. So let's say my pre-approval says 4.5% for a term of 30 years. I could do 15, whatever my pre-qual says. Within 5 days, obviously, I'm going to be making my application. Other guys, if this is where you're, sorry, this is for the seller. If you're representing the buyer here, this is where you might put, if you haven't used your affiliated business disclosure, this is where you might put the 350, okay, or the 175, whatever program you're on with us. Other transaction fee to Florida Realty Investments, $350. I prefer that you use the affiliated business disclosure. Okay, check one. Seller shall designate closing agent and pay for owner's policy and charges. 95 to 100% of the time, this is what we're using in this market. If your buyer is an attorney or they really want to use their closing agent or whatever, then they can do this. A lot of places in this area of Florida, most people, it's the seller pays for the title insurance. A lot of places around the United States, including Miami, the buyers do that. And there's a Miami-Dade provision that you won't need. Survey, home warranty, guys. I know there aren't a lot of home warranties in this seller's market because you're begging them to take your contract. But in a buyer's market, you see these all the time, where at closing, seller shall pay for a home warranty plan issued by whatever the home warranty company is, not to exceed $500–600, whatever it is. But right now, go ahead and do the NA if you're not asking for one. NA stands for not applicable, not asking, but doesn't matter. Special assessments. Go ahead and click this. Seller shall pay installments due prior to closing. A buyer shall pay installments due after closing. Installments prepaid or due for the year shall be prorated. Seller shall pay in full prior to time of closing any assessments allowed by the public body to be prepaid. I actually, if I'm on the buyer side, I want that one actually. Okay. I would like them all to be prepaid before I close. If not, if that's something you got to negotiate, then you may end up with that one. All right, let's continue. We're getting almost to the boilerplate stuff. Go ahead and put 20 days here. This is for elevation certificate. Put 20 days here. No questions till after, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Buyer shall have 7 days, 10 days, 5 days, whatever. Don't leave it blank unless you want 15 days. But in this market, a lot of people are doing 5 days. Some people are even doing 0 days. But buyer shall have blank amount of days to do it. Let's say I want 7 days. Still reasonable for a house of this type. Okay, boilerplate stuff here. This is all, you're not going to mess with any of this stuff. You should know it. If you don't know it, we can talk about it later. But you should know all this stuff. And then we're going to get down to these things. Okay. If it's condo, obviously condo rider, homeowners association rider. This one, I'm going to look real quickly at this. Was this in a homeowner association? Yes, it is in a homeowner association. So we're going to go back to this. I will get the attachment off of here. If you guys didn't see this, there should have an attachment here for homeowners association. They did. And so I'm going to add this to I'm going to have my buyers initial this. It's in Baldwin Park, $800 a year. They're going to sign off on that. And we're going to attach that. So I'm going to click that. Any of these things, if it were FHA VA, I would do this and I would find that addendum and attach that. If I'm doing appraisal contingency, whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm going to click on here. You guys have got to do a good job of doing this. A lot of people are not. Do I need a lead-based paint disclosure? I do not. It was not sorry. It's built in 2008. I do not need that. Okay. So that's where we click those things. Additional terms. If I'm doing additional terms, this is where I would do it. And this is where I sign, etc. So I put my client's name in here. My client is Ryan Langley. That's where I would put them. I would put their buyer's address for purposes of notice. And I would put my name here, which it already did for me. Okay, that is the as-is contract. Now we will open to any kind of questions that you guys might have.
I had one where
yes.
the seller pays before closing or after closing. I usually, I don't know if that changed, but when I saw you click it, I don't generate that one. Okay, right. So pay in full prior to closing, allow public from assessment. I usually put A, and the buyer shall pay after closing. Is that not correct?
Well, there's no correct or not correct. It's a matter of negotiation. So, but a lot of times you see these. I've dealt with a lot of condos, and they get these big assessments, and a lot of times they're $5,000, $7,000, $12,000, and they're paying $212 a month on them. If I'm a buyer, I would like that to be taken care of before I buy, because I probably didn't figure that into my purchase price when I looked at it. But so if I'm a buyer, that's what I'm asking for. Guys, when you're writing these as a buyer, and again, I wanted this to be pretty clinical in filling out the contract. There is no clinical way to fill out a contract. I get, sometimes a newer agent of ours will send me a contract, say, hey, does this look good? And I look at the contract and I go, yes, technically everything's filled out properly, but I don't know what your buyer is trying to accomplish. So yes, it's a legal contract, but I don't know. I can't tell you if it's good or not because I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. And the same, sometimes you guys on the listing side will be, which of these two contracts is better? I don't know. What does your seller want to accomplish here? Are they trying to, do they have a $50,000 deposit on a new home build and they have to close within the next 2 months? In which case it might be better to take a cash offer that's $10,000 less. Or are they going to retire on this money? They've already bought their RV. They can leave whenever they want. And every $10,000 helps. In that case, take a finance offer. And if it doesn't close, then you get another one and it might take another 45 days, but you're going to get $10,000 more, which is a good deal. So everything is different. Everybody's situation is different. Lisa, if you have an investor who wants to flip within 2 months, could they do number 83 assignability? They're not a wholesale. Yeah, you can do whatever you want. Guys, you can ask for whatever you want on these. And a lot of times people, let's go to assignability. Buyer may assign and thereby release from any further liability. Guys, if I'm the seller, I am not releasing you for further liability. Otherwise, all these contingencies are nada. I mean, they mean nothing. You can just walk away at any point. So you pretty much have an inspection period right up to closing. So you cannot be released from liability. Second one, may assign but not be released from liability under this contract. That's the one I would prefer if I'm doing any kind of assign. If I'm on the seller side or the buyer side, that's what I'm asking for. Unless I really want to flip a contract and get out of any kind of liability. Yes. Any other questions? Natalie, I saw your hand was up.
Ryan.
Hey, back in the day, we used to put prevailing for interest rates, especially with the interest rates the way they're going now. Is that not cool?
No, okay. So here we're getting into a little bit of gamesmanship and salesmanship here. I like to put whatever's on there, even a little bit lower. I like to, and the reason I like to put what's on the pre-approval, because in case it goes up and my client can't afford it anymore, then they can back out due to the financing contingency, right? So that's what I want on there, is what a pre-approval says. Sometimes even a little bit lower, just because it gives them a chance to back out right until the end of the inspection or the financing period. But yeah, I would not do prevailing, because if prevailing goes up, then your person could be stuck with that.
Okay, I look at everything, I seem like from a listing point of view, from the seller side.
Sorry. Well, yeah, absolutely. So from a listing point of view, if I'm on the seller side, yeah, I want to see that. I want to see prevailing. I don't want them weaseling out because they couldn't lock in their rate.
Right. Okay.
Right. So if I'm on, but again, if you're writing a contract, you're on the buyer's side.
Right.
Or at least you're on both sides. Right. Yeah. So, but I would, to best represent your buyer, you put what's on the pre-approval, what they've already been approved for, what you think they can lock in.
Yeah, but when it's coming across, and I'm the listing agent, I put prevailing. But okay, roof assessment. I've got a condo right now with a roof assessment of $94, and it just started, and they have no idea when it's going to end.
Then they haven't done there's no. That's not an assessment. An assessment has an amount. So okay. they might not know, but the board does. You got to find out. There's no such thing as a $94 a month assessment that doesn't have an end.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a special assessment, which it is for a roof.
It is.
So if I'm buying that, maybe it's $3,000 per unit or whatever, I'm going to say close it out. And in which case, you need to find that out before you put a price on it and say, yeah, we're going to sell it for $3,000 more, but remember, $3,000, this is going toward the special assessment, so there will be no special assessments carrying over. That's just the cleanest way to do it. Okay. I mean, if you've got a million offers on it, then just say, hey, tough luck. It comes with this assessment.
Yeah.
But in a fair market, or certainly in a buyer's market, but in a fair market, you're going to say it has a $3,000. I would put that in the realtor remarks. There's a $3,000 special assessment. Seller will take care of it at closing.
Thank you.
All right. Brian, quick question. On the addendum on number 19, on our appraisal contingency, do we have to check that? or is it automatically going to be appraisal if we don't put in there like way appraisal or stuff like that?
The appraisal contingency is in the contract under the financing things. There is a thing that says you can get out of it. Obviously, it doesn't meet your financing if it doesn't appraise. So no, you don't do this unless you attach the actual appraisal contingency.
So you just leave it blank, so it's still considered.
Yeah. There's no, if you don't attach an actual this is something for an addenda and an addenda. So or an addendum, which addenda is plural for addendums. There's no addendums. So if you do any addendum that you do, you click on here, you add, it doesn't do good. I'm pointing with my finger at my screen. Any addendum that you do on here, you add a check mark for that addendum that you do. So if you do a lead-based paint, yes. If you do a defective drywall, click here. If you do the appraisal contingency, you do there, but only if it's separate.
Okay, so but if you don't check anything on the appraisal contingency, it's still based on appraisal contingency, right?
It's based on the one that's in here, which states that if it does not appraise, then it does not meet the financing contingency.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes.
Yeah, I have two questions actually. The first one, back up under the assessment area where we were talking about whether seller pays or buyer pays after closing the assessments.
Yes.
It was always my understanding, but maybe I'm reading it wrong, that it says it's a public body and does not include condo or HOA assessments.
Okay. No, it says that.
Is that correct?
Which is what, well, yes, it is. Which in that case would be like a CDD or something like that.
Okay, or like if the city came in and put in new sewer lines and assessed.
Right. So either way, I'd want it to be done that way. But yes, okay. You're right.
But how would you cover then the condo association or the HOA association assessments?
I would do it the same way we just talked about with the other, with Natalie's question. I would just have them, I would have the seller cover them.
Okay.
You don't want your buyer on the hook for.
Would you just write that on a separate addendum then?
I would think it's assumed. I've never had to do that. I've always just had the seller take care of it. So okay. I would think it's assumed.
Okay.
But yes, if you want to do it on a separate addendum, or you can write it in the additional terms at the bottom.
Okay.
And if it's redundant, it's redundant.
My next question is, I believe the old contract used to have down at the bottom under addenda, it used to have seller's disclosure listed there, and it's no longer there. And it's not a problem for me because I never checked it anyways, because I know seller's disclosures can lead to issues with financing.
Yeah, seller's disclosure is not required.
Right.
But we require it. If it exists, we have to have it.
But I recently heard that if seller's disclosure is not checked off, that it does not become part of the contract. Is that correct or not correct? I mean, it's still a document that everybody.
It's not technically, anything that's not checked off on here technically isn't, but any kind of addendum that you do later obviously is. So yeah, anything is signed, anything signed by both parties is part of a contract, which is why because they don't want you doing separate agreements outside of closing between buyer and seller, because if there's a lender involved.
Right.
Because that's fraudulent. Anything that's not disclosed to the lender is fraudulent.
So if there is a seller's disclosure, it should be checked off there.
It should be put on here as under other. Yes.
Okay.
This is Ida. I have a question.
Yes.
This is in regards to the compensation from the other side. If they pay 2%, but I want 3%, is it okay to, before I show the property, to tell or mention to the buyer that my fee is 3%, and where do I put that, or this is not cool to do?
Okay,
because
great.
I know
what a great package of questions that is. Okay, you can't do that unless you have a buyer brokerage agreement. which we've talked about many times on here, which you should have with them, which says that they're going to pay you 3% for finding them a house. Anything that's offered by the other side through the MLS would be deducted from that 3%. And so they would owe you an extra percent, but that would be on a buyer brokerage agreement. You cannot, there is no place on here for I want to be very clear about this, for an MLS listed property with an MLS offer of compensation, you cannot negotiate that on a contract. Okay, that is between the listing agreement and the seller and you and the listing agent or broker. So I'm sorry, listing agent, I'm sorry. The whole thing's between the listing broker and the seller and between you and the listing broker, because that is what they're authorized to offer a cooperating broker on the listing agreement, okay? So if it says 2% in the MLS, you're getting 2% from the seller. If you have 3% on the buyer brokerage agreement, then you can get that other percent from the buyer, and you need to talk to the buyer about that. Now, is it possible that you don't have a buyer brokerage agreement because you were thinking I'm going to get 2.5 or 3%, and then you see the house that they love on there for $1,000, and they're only offering $1,000 minus $295 for whatever? At that point, can you talk to your buyer and have them sign a buyer brokerage agreement for the 3% or 2.5%? Absolutely. You just have to do it before you get them contracted on a house that's going to pay you $1,000 and then say, well, this isn't enough.
So to recap, we can do it, but it had to be specified on the buyer broker.
You got it. You can talk to, yes, you can talk to your buyer about it. Absolutely. Just be very upfront with them and go ahead and have them sign the buyer brokerage agreement that says that they're going to compensate you 3% or whatever, and put in the additional notes there that 3% will be minus, will be the amount offered by the seller via MLS offer of compensation will be deducted from the 3%.
All right, thank you.
All right, but yes, you guys do not, you guys do this because I get phone calls from people. Do not put in there your percentage at the bottom. You see people do this down here where it says Ryan Langley, and they'll do 4%. So I'm getting 4%. All right, and don't put in Fawn's amount. Don't put Fawn 2%. Sorry, Fawn. We can't. We first of all, we have no idea what Fawn might be getting 10%. We don't know. It doesn't matter. We don't count other people's money. And we don't put our percentage here because it was offered. And the MLS, Fawn is offering me, she's offered me 3%. So I'm happy with that. It doesn't matter if I'm happy with it or not. It's what she's offering. So I don't write 3% here. That's not what we do. This is a contract between a buyer and a seller. They're not negotiating our rates. Okay.
But the transaction fee was on there?
What?
I'm
sorry,
you
I
said
didn't
that
see
the
that.
transaction fee is on there.
On where?
On
Right.
this contract.
No. This is for, okay, great question. Let's go back and cover that up because I didn't want to get too far into that when we were doing that. That was in the seller and buyer, what everybody's paying for right here. Okay, so number 9. This is a lot of times, okay, back when it was a buyer's market or even an even market, you would see people write in here 3% toward buyer closing costs. I love doing this. And prepaids, I love doing it because it gets so small that people can't read it. And repairs. Okay, it gets so small that people don't see it, and I hate that. And I know I see Natalie shaking her head because as a listing agent, she hates that because it feels like they're trying to sneak one by you here, right? But what you see a lot of times is, well, buyers won't write this on here, but selling agents, which is the buyer's agent, won't write this on here, but they'll write it here is $350 transaction fee to Florida Realty Investments. You see we're getting smaller here too, right? This is, you can do this, and because the buyer is going to sign this contract, I prefer, and I'm glad, this is why I'm glad you asked, Carell, I prefer that you use an affiliated business disclosure that has the $350 fee that they owe you on there. And you send that to the title company to show that they've agreed that they owe you the $350. Okay, they owe Florida Realty Investments the $350.
I have some pretty strong feelings about this because I think it's unethical to charge the client for a transaction fee that you've made an agreement with your broker to pay. And it's a bugaboo of mine.
Okay, well, you don't have to do that. And if you're going to do that, and I can discuss I'm pretty analytical. I can discuss the mathematics with you. Then you should be paying the $30 a month and the $175 if you do more than 2 deals a year, because you're paying, that's $360 for a year, and you're saving $175 every transaction if you're paying it. So 2 transactions pretty much breaks even. If you do more than 3 in a year, then you're better off doing the $175 if you're paying the fee. Okay. But the fee is designed to be paid by the client, but you can pay it for them if you want to. There's certainly lots of you guys do that, and that's great. That's when I started in the business. Of course, we got 7%, but you didn't charge a transaction fee.
I have no problem paying my transaction fee. I have a problem paying the listing agent's transaction fee.
Well, yeah, why would you? Yeah, well, some listing agents want you to do that. But,
yeah, they do.
Jika, I had a case when I asked the listing agent if seller will give more commission to buyer's agent, and the seller agreed. Possibly, yeah, that could happen, but you can't demand it on an agreement, because what you're doing is you're holding your clients hostage for it if you put it on here. It is not an agreement between the buyer and seller. It is between the listing agent and the seller. The listing agent can go to the seller and say, hey, Jika's got a really good deal for us. He would like an extra 0.5% or an extra % of commission, or instead of just offering him $1,000, we're going to have to offer him the full amount. And the seller's going to say, well, how much does that offer? And they're going to say, well, it's going to more than make up for the difference. And the seller will say, okay, all right, that could happen, but you do not negotiate it or hold a deal hostage over your commission. If you don't like the commission that's being offered in the MLS, because there's a lot of them you're not going to like right now. There's 1%, and there's $100, and there's $1,000, and then there's $1 I've heard about. There's all kinds of stuff in there. If you don't like that, then you need to get with your buyer and say, I need to make 2.5% here or 3% here. But the idea is that I can pay 3% less for the property because they're not paying them the commission. Right? I mean, there's only so much money to go around. There's only one pie. So you got to figure that out. Okay. Any other questions or comments on the contract? And this has got into a full real estate thing, but I love it. So whatever it is you guys want to talk about, let's go. Again, I can only see a couple of you because when I'm sharing a screen. So. Any other questions here? No other questions on this? How about anything else? Anything else? I'm going to shut off this. How about anything else?
Ryan, quick question real quick. The inspection period days, and I apologize, I had to step out of the meeting earlier. The inspection period days and the loan approval days, those are referred as calendar days, correct? Not business days.
Correct. Those are calendar days. They just can't end on weekends, guys, or weekends or holidays. They carry over to the next business day, the end of them. Okay. Any other question? Yeah.
Sorry. So if a contract is effective on a Saturday, the inspection period day, meaning on a Saturday it was signed by both party and delivered, meaning the inspection period doesn't start until Monday?
No, it starts on whatever day is the next day. It can't end on a Saturday or Sunday. It slides over to Monday. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Or holiday.
Or a holiday. Thank you. It slides over to the next business day. All right.
And that changed, right, Ryan? It used to be 5, no, it's 12 p.m. Well, 11:59 p.m., right?
Yeah, I would always consider that. If you're trying to kick somebody out of a deal and keep their deposits for between 5 and 11:59, that's not going to work. It's 11:59. It is until the end of the day.
End of the day. It used to be 5.
There's I do not see the number 5 anywhere on this contract. 5 p.m.
No, the new contract, I think they changed it to 11:59, but before, I think they were up to 5 p.m.
Yeah, there's no 5 p.m. anywhere on here. Yeah.
I have a question.
Jika, yes, you're what you wrote about the monthly fee with FRI, that's correct. Why do some people want to charge the buyer the transaction fee? That's a great question, Lisa, because some people are cheap. And right now in this market, they can get away with it. 2 years ago, you didn't see that. 2 years from now, you probably won't see that. But right now, you're seeing that. 2 years from now, they'll be, 5 years from now, whenever the next buyer's market is, they'll be asking to pay your transaction fee. Just bring me a buyer, please. And people were, like we talked about the home warranties earlier. You guys remember a couple years ago, 3-4 years ago, you could get anybody to pay a home warranty. You put it in every offer, home warranty. Now, that's a good way to get your offer thrown out quickly. Jika, yes, contact Emily. Emily at flarealtyinvestments.com, and she will sign you up for the expert closer program, it's called. Go ahead, Mike. I think you had a question.
Yes, my question is about how I enter our forms into paperless pipeline and how I may be putting in confusion for people like you on the back end to watch it. So here's my question is, I get a listing, represent the seller, enter the proper forms into pipeline, go under contract, enter in the forms pending and things like that. Let's say the sale falls through. That transaction, that we cut a release and cancel, that transaction stops. Property goes back on the market, go under contract with another buyer, and I start entering now these forms into the same transaction that I use as a name for the transaction, for me, the street address. Does it, if I add these new forms into the same transaction under that name, does that throw any confusion on the backside as the duplication of forms, but different buyers in the transaction? Does that make sense?
Great. That's a great question. It makes complete sense. And I'm going to, well, I'm not going to do it for you right now to demonstrate, but I will tell you this. So there is a status called fell through that you will use when it first does that. You upload. So Kayla on the back end is going through. She's our sales administrator. She's going through and checking off all the documents that you send in. She's the one that takes them from unreviewed to reviewed. And you'll see one day you'll just upload stuff and the next day there'll be a bunch of check marks, right? And so you're going to upload, and I prefer, since you're going to be naming these, that you do cancellation / and by the way, you're naming, there's only one way to name your deals. It's by the street name, by the address. Okay. Please don't put, the Johnson deal. All right. Put 123 Oak Street. So that's great. You're going to have a checklist when you get a buyer. As a listing agent, you have it on your checklist as all the stuff that from the buy side of it. So the contract and all that stuff for, let's say that the Johnson family is buying this property, then the Johnson deal falls through. You're going to put the cancellation / and you're going to put -Johnson, and then you're going to put it back to active. Okay. We will see, Kayla will see the cancellation. Kayla should be giving you a brand new checklist, unchecking all the old items and giving you a brand new checklist.
Okay, then again, I should be looking for to make sure that she knows that transaction is done. I'm starting a new buyer.
Yes, she should uncheck your check marks, give you a new checklist that will already have your listing agreement obviously still valid. Everything else, all your listing documents are still valid and good, but she should uncheck all of the buyer documents.
Okay. All right, very good, thanks. Something else I want to throw in there, my 2 cents on seller's disclosure. That came up last week. You talked about that. The seller's disclosure, not part of the contract, nothing binding. We as realtors should not be involved in filling those. We don't fill those out. However, the way I present that to the sellers and use that seller's disclosure is to sit down during a listing, go over that line by line with the sellers, and I use it with the sellers kind of like, consider it a checklist. You're going to sell your property. All these things on here are going to be looked at by the buyer, buyer's agent, home inspector, appraiser, things like that. So I like to go over that and just have them look at everything. How well do you know your home? How well do you understand how this works? And if a question comes up from a buyer or an issue comes up from the home inspection, things like that, how would you handle this type of situation? You know, we can put dates on replacement of roofs, AC and stuff like that, but a lot of times buyers don't even consider all those things on there, you know, but it helps, I find that it helps myself and the sellers to really understand what could come down the line and how do we address that. And things as simple as insurance. I was talking over this form, the seller's disclosure, with the seller, and we came across, have you ever made a claim? And he says, you know, we made a claim last year and it really went wonky. We don't know what happened. It wasn't used, anything like that. And lo and behold, when the buyer came up, when it was their turn to purchase insurance, the insurance company said, wait a minute, there's a claim on here. Hold the phone. So what was nice about that is that the seller was aware they had to tackle it. They knew who they had to contact, and we could tell the buyer, yep, seller's looking into this. We got it. I mean, it actually put us out a little over 2 weeks for closing, but it was everybody, both sides knew that things were being worked on. It was, you know, ready to go and get handled properly. So seller's disclosure, that's what I use it for the most part, is to get the seller to realize what bumps could come up and how they would handle it if they do come up.
Okay, so you use it as a tool to be a thorough listing agent, which I like, and that helps deals close. Guys, I want you also to focus on what it really is, which is to make sure, which is great. You're using it as a tool. That's wonderful. What it really is, though, is something that protects us. Okay, it protects, and the way you present it to a seller is, yes, you can do it. You can do it that way, Mike. Well, what I like to do is say, guys, they can't come back on you later and say you didn't tell them, you didn't disclose to them. That's why we do it in writing, right? And so you sit there. I want it in their hand mark, with the handwriting, with their little check marks with their pen, to do this in case they're ever asked, who filled this out? I don't want them to say, which is great, Mike, that you do it that way, but make sure they're filling in the blanks. Okay, I don't want them to say, well, Mike did it. Mike coached us through it, because you don't want to be the coach, right?
Right.
You want to, you say, this is what the seller disclosed to me. Here it is in writing. I hand it to you, right? Unmolested by me. I'm handing you the form that they signed, that they filled out. What it does is protects you, protects us, and frankly, protects the seller, that they put that. And if they don't know something, for goodness sakes, right, you don't know, right? So that's good, though, that's how you find stuff out. But I would certainly let them fill it out. Do not coach them through it, nothing else. But it is to protect everybody throughout the transaction, including the buyer, right? So now the buyer knows everything the seller knows. If the seller does not disclose everything on there, then of course they can't get in trouble for that. But they should have been disclosing everything anyway. And if it's not material, then it's not material. If they get the wrong date on when the septic tank was pumped, it's not going to be the end of the world typically, unless they just completely lie about it.
Does the listing agent have to provide it to the buyer's agent?
It is not a legal requirement. If yes, they have to provide if they have one. Yes, absolutely. You should. They would be crazy not to.
But if they don't have one, or the seller refuses to sign it?
Correct. The seller can refuse to sign it. Yeah. And if that's the case, that's fine. Nothing you can do about that. If you do have one, we need to have it. It's one of our requirements. If you do have one, guys, please get them if you can. Like Mike said, you use it as a tool to find out what's really wrong with the house or what's really right with the house. And you find stuff on there to brag about that you maybe didn't know. We got a roof replaced in 2017. Well, that's kind of a big deal. That's kind of a new roof, a newer roof. It's good to know, good to put on the listing. Any other questions or comments? Lisa, are you still on YouTube? I'm not sure what that means. If you mean like, are we still recording this after we were done with the as is? Yes, it's still recorded and it will be on YouTube starting tomorrow, probably. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, guys. Well, if there are no other questions or comments, we'll move along. I appreciate everybody for coming in today. And if you have any comments or questions, now will be the time. We're going to leave. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon. All this stuff will be on our YouTube channel. If you don't know it, email Emily for it. I'm going to put Emily's email in the chat. It is the same as mine, except Emily. And email her if you would like to get on the expert closer, or if you would like to get directions to our YouTube channel, get the link to it. All right, guys, have a great day. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you, everybody.